Happy Friday from FluteTube. I'm doing one more video this week as a follow-up on the topic of practicing harmonics. Today's video is very related. It's on the topic of practicing whistle tones. If you've watched my recent episodes especially, you should be able to hear now that these whistle tones are generated from the harmonics series, which is why I'm adding whistle tones to our series of episodes on harmonics. Finding whistle tones on your flute involves a very different technique than normal flute playing. They can be very difficult to find in the first place. There are two basic ways to find whistle tones on your flute. One is to finger a high note in your third register up on the high D or beyond, and you play that note, but you get just this tiniest little ghost hint of the normal full-blown notes up there in the third register. Think of blowing very, very slow air, almost no air at all. You need to have really good support underneath these whistle tones, but you're barely using any air. It might feel like you're only letting the tiniest little wisp of air escape from your embouchure. I like to play notes like high G or A, maybe B flat or B natural, right up there at the top of your flute range. The whistle tones may speak more easily. The other way that you can find whistle tones is that you can play one of your lowest pitches, a C or a B, maybe a D could be more comfortable to start, but you're not actually trying to play that fundamental pitch. You get the tiniest bit of a residual sound on that fundamental pitch, but what you're really trying to do, we want to generate the harmonic series out of that fundamental low pitch. How do you do that? Although you want to have excellent support behind the airstream, you want to use very slow air. Maybe you think of using no airspeed at all. Don't think of pushing the air, you're just letting it trickle out. You need to blow with a relatively large open aperture, the hole between your lips. I think of using air that's similar to when you want to fog up a window in cold weather. In order to do that, you're using warm, slow, soft air, not fast or hard air. Think of making your aperture bigger, especially vertically, and letting your lips come forward. And you're going to be using the tiny muscles that are in the center of your embouchure. I like to think of using the little tiny muscles that are on the inside of my lips, right behind our usual visible lips. And as you can probably imagine right now, you'll certainly be able to feel when you play your flute, that forces your lips to come forward when you're practicing these whistle tones. That's the approach to whistle tones in a nutshell. It can take a lot of experimentation to find them because it is a very different technique than getting a full-blown flute sound. But let's talk about the advantages as to why you would practice whistle tones. The biggest advantage of practicing whistle tones is that they help you to relax your lips and your throat. Because you're using the tiny muscles that are in the center of your embouchure, you get a lot better control of those muscles. It also helps you to have an increased awareness of what you're doing with your airstream and support because it's quite different from what you normally do. And not surprisingly, this is especially good to develop an awareness of what you're doing with these things in soft playing, since whistle tones are so incredibly soft. All of this should help you to be more relaxed in general, and especially your embouchure should have much less tension when you have been practicing whistle tones and then you start playing something else. Hopefully you're getting the idea that whistle tones can be a great way to warm up because they force your embouchure to relax and come forward, and we want that in so much of our flute playing all the time. It's a great way to get yourself there as part of your warm-up routine. They're especially good to do if you're feeling tense or nervous about something. So they're very popular to use backstage before you come out to play for people because it helps force yourself to relax before you go play in a high pressure situation. You can't create whistle tones if you're pulling your embouchure back. So it helps students get past smiley embouchure. If you need to bring the corners of your lips forward, whistle tones will help you to do that. A few other things you can try if you're having trouble finding these whistle tones. Think of opening your jaw so you get that vertical space in the aperture between your lips. Think of having space between your back molars. Sometimes people like to think, just in general, but this applies to whistle tones as well, about having carrot sticks or something between your back molars so that it's helping your jaw to hang more open. And that, of course, will give you more vertical space in your embouchure. If you're struggling to get overtones, probably your lips are too close together and probably they're too tense. And if you're listening to what I'm saying, you can tell why practicing whistle tones is so good for your flute tone in general, because getting tension out of your embouchure in every way that you can is always going to help improve the resonance in your sound. Obviously, all of this is great for embouchure control. Whistle tones really do help you to develop a flexible and precise embouchure. Whistle tones also help you develop great control of a very small, thin, fragile, delicate airstream. You learn to be very confident playing in soft dynamics and keeping a controlled, smooth sound in your soft dynamics. Beyond practicing these as a warm-up, sometimes composers will ask for whistle tones as an extended technique in a piece of music. If you're a composer or a composer flutist, you should know that whistle tones are very difficult for flutists to sustain. That's part of why it's great to practice sustaining specific whistle tones. If a composer does ask for a specific tone as a whistle tone, they really should use the third register, the top register. That's where by far it's easiest to pick and sustain a specific pitch. As a musical device, flute whistle tones are just much more effective in that third highest register of the flute. Up there, you can play little melodies using specific whistle tones when you get used to the technique, and it's not as difficult. If a composer asks for approximate pitches, changing whistle tones, which they often do when they ask for this technique, that's when you would use our second method that I mentioned, getting whistle tones out, where you finger a low fundamental and then you aim for a series of harmonics or overtones that come out of that low fundamental, so you're not looking for a really precise whistle tone pitch. Considering all that we've said, this is not going to be a big shock, but whistle tones are known among flute players to be an excellent way to warm up if you have to be very quiet when you're warming up. If you're standing right backstage and you want to play something, you want to get your embouchure going, you want to get your airstream and your support engaged, but you can't make a lot of noise. You can be right backstage and play whistle tones and not get in anyone's way in terms of sound. Also, if you live in an apartment building or a dorm and it's too late at night or too early in the morning to really start making a lot of loud noises on your flute, whistle tones are a great way to get things going, get those little muscles working without waking up your neighbors. I remember coming across a story years ago. It was a story that involved a father and a daughter. And the daughter mentioned that when she was just a little baby, her father would come into her room at night with his flute and he would play this whistle music and put her to sleep with it. I wish I could find that story again. It was years ago that I came across it. If anyone knows what I'm talking about and can reference it, I think I must owe you a free lesson or something. Even at the time, I thought it must have been written by someone who actually was a flutist or had a flutist in their life and they understood about whistle tones, because that description of the father playing whistle tones to help a little baby go to sleep is kind of a perfect way to deal with whistle tones. If you practice them softly at night for something like 10 minutes. It's especially good to do at night if you have something big the next day, if you have an audition or a competition, because it gets your embouchure very relaxed in advance of that big day. The next time you pick up your flute, the next morning or afternoon, you will be automatically in a more relaxed place with a more forward embouchure. These exercises are also sometimes called whisper tones or whistle sounds. You might see them referred to that way from time to time. If you have a hard time finding them, that is all the more reason to seek them. That's all the more reason to believe that they will lead to improvement in your playing, because they will force you to re-examine what you're doing with your embouchure and find more relaxed and open ways to get sound. If you're having trouble finding the solution, be creative, try all kinds of new and different things with your embouchure. But remember, the solution is going to involve relaxing, opening wider, more vertically, coming forward, using a slow, tiny airstream, thinking of a wide open mouth and relaxed embouchure, and maintaining great support while at the same time not blowing very much air at all. You can also try things like whistling, actually whistling, or singing in order to re-envision what you're doing with your embouchure. You need to help yourself find a new mindset if you're having trouble getting them to speak. You'll also want to be very flexible with the shape of your mouth cavity inside your lips. Thinking of different vowels, maybe you think ah or o for the low register, maybe e for the high register. My mouth cavity changes a lot if I'm playing a low fundamental pitch and going up and down the harmonic series. By the way, unless I suppose a composer were specifically to ask for it, I never try to articulate when I do whistle tones. It's just too disruptive to this fine, delicate little sound. You just start to blow and find the whistle tone without articulating in advance. Sounds like a tea kettle.